Welcome back to the Land Bulletin Podcast, where every other week we bring you experts in the field to impart their knowledge when it comes to the ranch and sporting property market, buying and selling advice, the latest best stewardship practices, as well as topics that impact landowners every day. I'm your host, Haley Mirr. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Land Bulletin Podcast. I'm Haley Mirr, and today we're bringing you a special holiday episode while you guys are hanging with family, need, to maybe get away from family, need a break. We're talking about a few wildlife interactions we've had as brokers along the way, from, winter hunting spots to kind of finding yourself in the middle of nowhere and having eyes on a moose. We thought it'd be fun to see kind of what our guys see on a regular basis out there, on ranches, on hikes with their families. So we're going to start first with our broker out in Utah, Chris Corroon. Chris, I'd love to hear, I know you're always kind of on the road. You do a lot outside. What are some really cool stories of interactions you've had with some animals out there?
Well, I think like all you guys, we've all had some interesting interactions over the years, and whether it's being chased by a moose or running into porcupines or bear or whatever. But probably my most memorable was long time ago when I had hair and I was able to jog in the mountains. I was a little bit more athletic. I used to live up in Midway, Utah, which is in Wasatch County. Beautiful area. I lived at the base of the Wasatch Mountain State Park, and there was one afternoon. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was jogging up towards a ridge line behind my house, and one of those typical kind of late summer storms rolled in, where all of a sudden the temperature dropped and the sky got dark, wind started blowing, and I said, "You know what? I don't want to be fooling around with lightning." So I turned back, and I lived in an area which was, again, surrounded by a state park, but a lot of deer, tons of mule deer. And as I was jogging back towards my house, I encountered a mule deer, which was a pretty good sized deer. It was running right at me, and its eyes were as big as light bulbs. And mule deer, they usually kind of hop a little bit when they're getting out of your way, but this thing was at a full gallop and just stopped dead in its tracks and looked at me and just bolted up the side of this mountain. And I thought, boy, maybe that mule deer has like a sixth sense of where the next bolt of lightning is going to hit, and I wanted to get out of here. So it kind of spooked me. I jogged about 10 seconds, and then I just had this presence. Something was behind me, and I turned around, and probably literally 20 feet away was this pretty good sized cougar that was just staring right at me.
So scary.
And didn't appear to be annoyed by me or spooked by me, but it just we locked eyes for a few seconds, and I thought I was seeing a ghost, because I was in an area again with a lot of mule deer, and where there's mule deer, there's typically mountain lions, and it just it turned its head and casually trotted away, and then it bolted. So it was probably
Jeez.
probably an immature. I mean, it was not a full grown cat. It was probably immature mountain lion that was kind of trying to learn how to hunt and whatnot. But it really spooked me, because those are very rare animals to see in the wild. And I've heard stories of hunters that have been tracked by them and have encountered them. But Utah, there's not a ton of cougar sightings as you see in, say, Washington State, Vancouver Island, or even Colorado. You guys have more cougar sightings. So it was a really, really special event for me, and I'll never forget that one. It scared the what out of me, but I did jog down the trail a little bit and got home pretty quickly. So
That's good. Yeah, how do you interact with a cat when you see it like that in the wilderness?
well,
Was
hopefully,
your first instinct to just kinda, like, back off, or
yeah, I just
what
backed
did you
off. I didn't make myself look big. None of that. Didn't seem to be aggressive, or wasn't like pawing the ground, and didn't have young with it, which is really the worst. They say you don't want to turn your back on a mountain lion, and they say that their first response if they get aggressive is to make yourself look big, make a lot of noise. Hopefully, it'll back off, but I didn't have to do any of that. It got out of there before I did, so I felt pretty lucky.
God, my
So
hands are sweating.
yeah, it
Did you
was
guys
cool. It's an option.
have you guys interacted with a cat, Eric or Woody, in the wilderness?
I've seen 1 or 2. Once when I was a kid, and was, pretty spooked by it, because I was kinda solo, and, um, and then once just very brief, glance, more recently, but, they're pretty powerful. Just seeing one's pretty rare.
I've had two experiences with cats. Well, a couple more than that, but the one that I can tell you where I was most frightened is we were in the southern Bighorns and hunting elk, and our hunting group was a bit dispersed, and I was trailing a friend of mine who thought he was on an elk, and so we were kind of putting together our strategy. And so he kind of went a little bit more south than I did, and I ended up in this draw and no cell phone service, kind of dark, and we're going up this draw, and it came into a Y, and we thought the elk was kind of more to the left, so I kind of went to the right a little bit, and I'm like looking at my map, and I look down on the ground and I see flies. I thought, well, geez, I don't really see flies all that often in October. Um, and then I looked down again and there was a mound of dirt with the flies on top of the mound. I thought, well, that's really weird. And then I looked even further and I thought, well, that's an antelope leg underneath the mound. So that's why the flies are there. And then I looked next to that mound and there was another mound with another antelope leg. And I thought,
My God.
I know what this is. This is the cat's next meal. And if I don't get out of here, maybe I'm the meal after that. Because what cats do, of course, is they eat and then they save, you know, quarters for later without trying to be too gruesome. And but they typically watch, and so they're watching their meal, making sure that no other critters actually come back. And so I was a critter in a cat's eyes. And so I don't know that I've ever moved that fast before in my life. I slung everything over my neck and I crawled up this rock face like I was a billy goat getting out of there. And I think I was sweating. My hair was up. I was by myself in this draw in the middle of the mountains. So I think cats are probably the spookiest creatures we all kind of sometimes have fortunate to see and sometimes don't. And just know that you're being watched.
Yeah, it's like we respect them. We know, why but keep your distance. And I didn't know that about them watching their meal. That's really good to know if you see something like that, like this isn't just by happenstance. There's something kind of around that made this happen. So thanks for the knowledge there, Eric. So we
Yeah,
can
I hope
watch
you don't
out.
run into that situation, Erik.
And Woody, you've lived in Colorado your whole life. What are some of your favorite stories of running in, other than the cats that we've been talking about?
Well, my kinda maybe most amazing wildlife encounter, was in Alaska, and I was an activist for Greenpeace. Greenpeace had hired a crew of us to support a action against an oil rig off the coast of Prudhoe Bay, and we camped. A group of us were the land kind of crew while the ship came up around the coast of Alaska, and we watched this oil crew all summer, watching the cell traffic and the shift traffic, and we essentially did a siege on the rig. All the Greenpeace accoutrement, the boats and the helicopters and all that. We were opposing them moving this oil rig from Prudhoe Bay to off the coast of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and uh, we were camped in what was very well known as polar bear habitat and polar bear terrain, where they cub, and
Jeez.
then they occupy during the spring and winter, and then they leave in the summer and go out to the pack ice. And we had all summer long seen a lot of sign, mostly big, huge tracks and scat piles in these sandbars. We were camped on this, just basically a sandbar that was about 3.5 feet above water line, and the tidal surge, the storm surge would be as high as 7 feet. So we had to be able to get out of there if a storm came. But it's pretty mild up there in the summer. And we ultimately ended up moving to go and occupy the location where they were going to move this rig. It was, again, a series of press events that we were trying to stir up. And when we moved to the coast of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, we saw a polar bear and her cubs, and that she was doing what they do on sandbars, just like our sandbars
Wow.
that we'd been camped on all summer long. So it was kind of like, wow, that's pretty impressive. But we were far away. We were kind of looking there with binoculars. And kind of long story short, we ultimately drew the ire and the attention of the oil patch and the oil industry and the feds and the Coast Guard. And so we got wind that the Coast Guard was coming to impound the boat. And so the Danish captain said, well, screw this. And he took the ship and he went, and we got out of national water into international water, and we parked the ship up against the pack ice in the Arctic. And so the radar can't detect the ship from the ice, and they can't find us. And we parked there for 3 days, and we were just spinning our wheels. At this point, we'd been camping all summer. Now we're on this ship, and we're kind of like, we're starting to get bored. And there were a crew of us from, I was living in Montana at the time. There was a handful of us from Montana. We're sitting in the galley of the ship playing cards. And that galley deck is probably maybe 8 feet up off what would be the surface water level of where the ship's sitting in the water. And we're sitting there playing cards. And all of a sudden we look, and this polar bear looks in the window of the galley, and we're like, what? We throw our cards down. We go scampering up the 2 decks above, and we look down, and there's this bear looking up.
So scary.
He's casing the boat. He's on the ice where we're parked next to it, and he's casing this boat. He's looking up there. He's like, if I could get up there and kick your ass, I would. And he said, the guy, and we were taking pictures. We're scrambling around, everyone on the ship trying to look at this bear. And so it was pretty exciting, and it was a very impressive animal. It was a lone animal this time. We don't, I can't remember if it was male or female, but a pretty damn. He's standing 8 feet tall, looking in the window of this ship. And about 2 days later, the Danish captain decided to finally leave, and we were going to try to get back to Anchorage without getting caught or whatever. That's a different story. But we were about 2 days away. So we're now 30 miles from the pack ice. We're out in the Arctic, north of Prudhoe Bay, and we're 100 miles from land. And we're out there in the water, and it had been in one of these first warm years where all the oceans had really were much higher temperatures than normal. So all the marine mammals, they're feeding on krill, are up in the Arctic. And we saw all kinds of whales and every species you can imagine. But we're out there steaming along. And damn, if there isn't a polar bear out swimming in the water, 30 miles from the pack ice, 100 miles from land. And we got up and we're down looking at this thing in the water. And again, this bear's looking up and is like, if I could figure out how to get up in that boat, I'd kick your ass. It was so undaunted, so did not care about us, and was just looking for this ship did not impress it at all.
Yeah.
And, it was maybe the most impressive thing I've ever seen in terms of wildlife. It was just, we were out as far away as you can be from anything, and here was this bear. And, I mean, we never felt in danger because we were up on the ship, but boy, was it impressive.
Yeah. So you were saying 30 miles out of like anywhere he could potentially.
Yeah. And I believe, I have to double check, they had a cool library in the ship of the Greenpeace. We were looking them up. I think polar bears are classified as marine mammals because everything they eat is marine. I mean, they eat seals and walruses and all that stuff. And I think technically they may be classified as a marine mammal. So it's pretty cool.
Wow. How long were you in the Arctic? How many weeks or months were you up there?
We came up via land probably mid-June, and we were there until I think early September. We finally got back. There was a lot of sitting around waiting that we got impounded and then processed on the dock in Homer, but I think that was first week of September. So we were there pretty much all summer.
That's so cool. Yeah, I've never been up there, but I mean, that's where wildlife exists. That's, if you really want to see it, it's up there.
Yeah. And the Arctic summer is amazing because the sun's just doing these laps and, these long days, and it never goes down. It's pretty impressive. By September, it's going down just for a little bit, but during the main part of the summer, it was just a one big long day. It was pretty cool.
And while Casey, Wyoming is not the Arctic, have you seen some really cool animals up there, up at the ranch, Eric?
Yeah, I think it's always, we always think about cats kind of, and had a neat experience this year. I was, again, hunting for mule deer, and I was with a good friend. We'll call him CD. And we were in the shade after a long hike in the morning, decided just to kind of park it in the shade and just be quiet and see if something happens and develops. And we had been there for 2 hours, and obviously we were being quiet enough, and a bobcat showed up, which I think we put on social media here at Mirr Ranch Group. But a
Yeah.
bobcat showed up like 40 yards from us, and CD kind of pinched me with a small move, and I kind of looked up, and there was this bobcat just kind of walking by us and looking at us, and we didn't move, and it just strolled by. We weren't spooked. It wasn't spooked. I mean, it was just one of those surreal moments that you only get if you're quiet for hours in the wilderness and letting things
Yeah.
happen around you, because it's certainly more their environment than our environment. And so we're in their space. And so it was really neat. And then as it kind of kept walking along, we noticed that it had a kitten. And so then there was a kitten kind of jumping up and down next to mama. And it was pretty cool. And then we thought, and then it kind of dipped back over the edge of the bowl we were in. We were on top. And we thought, well, I wonder where it went. And so we went up to the edge and looked over. It was gone. I mean, it was somewhere else. So it's neat to be quiet, letting nature develop on its own.
Yeah. And it's neat. I'm not as cool as you guys. I haven't experienced a cat in the wilderness other than safari in Africa, which,
That's pretty
what
wild.
That's what you're paying to see.
Pretty wild.
But it's really neat. Ken always talks about you can find your own safari in the West. Like it's really cool to see. And people don't, if you just live in the cities out West, you never really get to experience some of this stuff. But to be able to kind of, when we were down at Trinchera Ranch a couple years ago as a company and seeing those elk herds at sundown kind of come out of nowhere, it's your own safari in your backyard, which is really cool. And it's neat to know that you guys have had a lot of these experiences out in the field and on ranches that you've been on, because you don't need to go to Africa to see some of this stuff if you really do spend the time to kind of see some of these things. I guess a follow-up, maybe all of these experiences you guys have had have been when you've been the most scared, but when have you been maybe the most scared in the wilderness? Maybe it's because of animals, maybe it's because of something else. And then how did you kind of overcome that and like get out of that situation? I'll start with Woody.
Oh gosh. I didn't know we were going to get this. It was probably, I spent a summer walking from Montana to Colorado, and I was alone in southwestern Montana, and kind of north of the Italian peaks. I was probably a good day away, or 2 days from the interstate, and I was probably a day away from the last ranch that I'd kind of passed. And I was worn out, and I was probably dehydrated and exhausted, and I had very weird experience during the day where I had been kind of in a fit of rage, lost, and had lost my map, or hadn't been able to I was trying to figure out where I was pissed off and thrashing about, and out of nowhere, like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, this tree just slapped me in the face. So wasn't anyone else walking in front of me to have the branch go forward and then come back and get me. It was just like the branch just told me to grow up, young man, and slapped me in the face. And so it was a little startling, and I kind of, whew. But when I finally kind of figured out where I was, and I went to make camp that night, when I went to my little stove and cook and boil water, I passed out, and I started getting so I couldn't stand up, and I was having some kind of vasovagal or whatever response, and it was very startling, and it took me about an extra day to rehydrate and get to where I could stand up and stand up without having to sit back down, and I was pretty far from anywhere, and I was alone, so it was a pretty daunting, and I was afraid at that point. I turned out I was fine. The next day, I was kind of back to normal, but for a day or two, it was a little daunting to be not sure what my physical condition was and what I was going to do about it.
Yeah,
No
that's super
phones,
scary.
no cell phones, none of that in those days. So kind of trippy.
Yeah, just kinda sitting in that and thinking, "Okay, what's tomorrow? How do I get through tonight?" Like,
Well, and the
what's
trees are messing with me, right?
and the trees are messing with you. No one's on your side in that situation. What about you, Eric? Was the seeing the dead animal parts kinda, like, strewn about one of those scary moments for you?
Yeah, I think that's probably ranks right up there. And I was just thinking about probably lightning, kind of
Yeah,
having a
yeah,
lot of
that's my
close
story.
calls, uh, two of which were near the top of 14ers, and a
Yeah.
hair um, on its end on my neck and arms, and were got cliffed out and had to run back over the 14er because we were young and dumb and making bad decisions on following trails and not following trails. But I think that, Woody's experience, Arctic got me thinking about Alaska, and I've been fortunate to go up there a couple times. And, I think the first time we were in Whale Bay, which is on the east side of Baranof Island down south of Juneau. It's just south of Sitka, actually, um, in the Alexander Archipelago. And we were in Whale Bay, and we had uh, taken a small boat up into this bay, and we got out with fly rods, and we were silver salmon fishing with fly rods, and with my daughter, who was probably 6 at the time. And there's a waterfall, and there are bears on top of the waterfall. We're fishing below that waterfall for these silvers that are trying to go up the waterfall. And, we weren't scared, but having my daughter there, I had never been that close and in water to a bear,
Mhm.
and recognizing that they're way more focused on the fish than us. But I still just not comfortable with it entirely. It's like,
Especially with your
okay,
daughter with you, it's like,
they are they are they coming around the waterfall? Are they gonna swim into this water? Like, what are they actually doing? Was it super abreast of all of bear behavior in Alaska, and nothing ever happened, and we were told we should be fine. But should is that one of those words that make you feel comfortable in the wilderness.
Yes,
But I think bears can provide that humility out there for all of us.
I would agree. And Chris?
Yeah, no, those are great stories. I've had a couple of scary encounters. One, I had to spend the night in a hunter's camp. It was a very cold night, but probably in 1988, when the summer that Yellowstone was burning down. You guys probably recall that. It was a really
Mhm.
horrendous fire season. I was in the Wind River Range with a couple of guys. We were packing from Lander to Pinedale, and it was back in the day when we had 60-pound packs. Those external
Yeah.
paint frame packs with a lot of heavy climbing gear. And long story short, we ran into a forest fire, a pretty
Oh,
nasty
geez.
fire. We'd been in the wilderness for probably um, almost a month, and as we were headed to Pinedale, we ran into a really gnarly fire. I'll never forget. It was just east of Valentine Lake in the winds, and we had another day. We got up that morning. There was ashes on our sleeping bags, and two of the guys hiked down a canyon. We knew there was a fire to kind of see what was going on, and we spent. Long story short, we spent the entire day basically fleeing a series of fires that had caught. Not
Jeez.
knowing, if we were going to get out. We got down into the kind of the foothills of the winds this side of Pinedale. We've been in the mountains for quite, like I said, almost a month, and we ran into some wet, boggy stuff and just kind of ended up on a Forest Service road, luckily, and got picked up by a Forest Service crew that was knew we were out there, that was looking for us. That was really
Jeez.
kind of pretty scary. So, because
Wow.
there was when
Really?
we first encountered the fire, we were down by a lake, and remember looking up at these lodgepole pines just exploding. And and it was I never thought we'd have any issues with fire, but that was a long time ago. That was even when I had more hair before I ran into the mountain. Even better shape. So I don't know if I could pull that off today. So that was
I'm like envisioning you with like really long flowing locks. How much hair
yeah.
did you have?
Forest fires and lightning. Those are things like Erik.
Yeah.
What do you guys have all said? Those are animals are unpredictable, but we all know that when we get out into the wilderness, kind of these days you've got GPS, you've got Onyx, Land ID, you've got weather forecasts, cell phones, of course, which back in the 80s and even early 90s, we had none of that stuff. So we use maps and compasses. So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's true. I think the scariest I've ever been is backcountry skiing and avalanches. And even with that stuff, it's, you have CAIC, some of those kind of systems that help you kind of understand snowpack and all those things at your disposal. But it is the natural elements, I think, that are unpredictable that you got to really be wary of. And then my last kind of fun question for the holiday season to get to know you guys a little bit more for our listeners is, what is one of your favorite stories of being on a ranch where either, you were just impressed by Mother Nature and kind of like the expanse of what landscapes in the West are, or kind of an experience with a client, something where you just were like, this is why I love what I do. This is why I love the West. This is why I love being outside.
Maybe I'll just start with more of a general statement, but I think that a lot of us enjoy a lot of activities on these fabulous places that we get to visit and tour and work on in kind of the spring to fall, right? There are a lot of activities and a lot of people enjoy those 3 seasons, but anytime you're out in the winter, it just seems a little bit more peaceful. There's something about a couple inches of snow, whether it's windy or not. It just, it's just like this really satisfying place where you always kind of feel like it's tranquil, it's peaceful, it's you're thankful to be outside and not inside in those moments. So I guess that would be my general comment before I think of something more specific.
I would agree. My favorite thing is in the wintertime when it snows or right after it snows and it's nighttime, but it's bright out.
Yeah,
Like that feeling. That's
beautiful.
like one of my favorite feelings in the entire planet.
Beautiful.
What about you? What are some of the times where you're just grateful to be
Well, I would
on the
have
land?
to say when I a few years ago sold a ranch in New Mexico that was out on the eastern prairie on the both sides of the Canadian River Gorge. This is really remarkable part of the world where the Canadian River cuts through what is otherwise just big broad prairie, and it subsequently provides an immense amount of habitat and secure wildlife out in the midst of these two huge ranches. There's this little smaller ranch that was in on the canyon that was called 20 Hatchets. It's now called Tres Hermanos. There's a neat story behind that. But getting to know that property was really neat because it's very remote. It was 14 miles from the road on one side and 20 miles from the road on the other. And you had to really kind of find your way in there. And what was neat about it is that these had been old Hispanic homesteads. There were families that had lived out there before electricity, and even after electricity, without electricity, um, in these just very not primitive but simple uh, habit, cabins and outbuildings. They had figured out how to retain water, these little cisterns in the on the cliff walls, the canyon walls, and had etched a living how they had grown peaches in the base in the bottom of the canyon, um,
Yeah.
and kind of you had to spend time out there to walk anywhere to really show the property. You had to really kind of spend some time climbing around and coming to get a sense of the people that had lived there. Uh, for so long, these families, was really a kind of both humbling and inspiring time, and it just really quiet out there. It was wonderful, both with the seller who kind of showed me and taught me about the property, but then also to the buyer who ultimately came to love it. And it's been neat to stay in touch and get to see what they're doing with it. And they're really trying to keep it much the same way. I'm proud to say that pleased to say that they have subsequently recorded a conservation easement on the ranch with the New Mexico Land Conservancy. So was a really neat memory.
That's awesome. What about you, Chris?
So I would say I'm a kind of a winter guy. So probably, I love just visiting all these listings that I've got in Utah and Idaho, which are spectacular. My favorite time of year is winter, so I love the snow. But probably my most enjoyable experiences have been, and I know I've talked to Woody about this, is skate skiing. I love Nordic skiing. I'm a big skate skier, and I go out. The Uinta National Forest has a groomed trail system, and I used to go out with my Weimaraners, and I'd go skijoring with those dogs. I'd go in the evening as the
That's
sun was
awesome.
setting. Really cold January, kind of late December, early January evenings, and bring my headlamp. And to me, that was probably that probably is the most enjoyable part of my being outside and being on. I've got a couple of ranches that listings that you could do this on as well. So I haven't done that in a while. I'm looking forward to doing some more of that. My dogs have died, so but Weimaraners are great skidoo dogs, by the way, if anybody's into that kind of stuff. And if you see my profile picture on the Mirr Ranch Group page, you'll see I'm with old Ace. He was a great dog. He was a great runner. Um, and my skate skis. But that's really what I loved. That's probably the most enjoyable thing. I'm not a big hunter. On my bird hunt, I do some duck hunting, but being on those Nordic skis to me is good exercise, right? Good endorphins and all that stuff. So that's to me is the best thing I could do on the
Chris, I
well,
gotta ask. I too loved the skate ski and it, but you say skijoring it. Do I understand that you're skating along and the dog is towing you at the same time? So are you going double the
well, the
pace?
dogs to give you just a slight little tug. So
Mhm.
you're going really, your own speed, but the dogs do propel you a little bit. They're not towing you because they couldn't tow me. I'm too heavy. But they do give you a little push, and it's a lot of fun. It's they work with you, they interact with you, and they love it. The dogs absolutely love it because they feel like you're chasing them and running with them. So it's just a
Yeah.
great exercise. And doing it at night too is in the evening. You guys all know those winter evenings when
Oh,
kind of the sky's got all different colors and it's just cold as it can be, and it's a lot of fun. It's great exercise. So
that's awesome. I should get Tater a skijoring kind of
yeah.
harness and have him.
Some
He wouldn't
dogs are
get
good
very
at it, and
far.
sometimes the dogs get all tangled up in the skidoo harnesses and leashes, but,
Yeah,
yeah, it's fun. You gotta get the right dog.
that's so special. Yeah, you could bring your dog out probably, Woody. He'd probably do better than
Yeah,
Tate.
that's what I'm gonna follow up, Chris. I'm curious about getting that rig.
That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time We had a great holiday celebration yesterday. Chris, we missed you, but it's just really cool to wrap up the year with you all. And I'm hoping that this winter and into 2025, you find some kind of moments of reflection and times outside, because that's really why we do what we do. But I really appreciate you guys taking the time this very busy holiday season to chat with me today. So thanks for coming.
Hey, it was great fun. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Haley.
Yeah. Nice to see you guys.
Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Bye. Merry Christmas.
Thanks for joining us today. To learn more about the ranch real estate market or our ranch marketing process, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter on our website at mirranchgroup.com or give us a call at 303-623-4545. See you next time.